Welcome to another episode of Podcat. This is Kat, and I am here with my lovely guest, KIANA.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you wanna introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
What's your job? Where do you work? All those fun things.
Okay, so my name's KIANA, and I am currently a DJ at 106.1 BLI.
My favorite station. Oh my gosh.
It's my favorite too.
Okay, so that brings me into the first question. Radio stations growing up, what did you listen to?
BLI all the way, and that's gonna sound so, like obviously something I would say, but it is so true because I grew up in one of the main hot zips for BLI, so it was sort of just everything. Back in 2001, CDs were barely a thing. Cassette tapes, I didn't know how to work. I was like 6 years old, so it was the radio. So I grew up listening to it in, it's 2000s glory, just everything, late 90s, 2000s. So a lot of BLI and, of course, the other Long Island stations, too, which is funny because I've worked at a lot of them. I interned over at Connoisseur Media, so I listened to Walk, that was a main one, and Party 105, which I worked at before I came to BLI because my dad was super into freestyle music, and that's what it started out as. But you could say that I listened to BLI for a majority of my childhood.
Of course, and I think that's so important too because we both work for BLI, so I feel like we just have the passion because we listened to them for so long. We listened to that station. It's our home station. It's our local Z100. New York City has Z100. This is our Z100. This is a big deal to us.
Exactly. And that's actually such a funny story because until I interned somewhere where people were talking about it, I didn't even know that Z100 really existed. That's even with Twitter and stuff, growing up, being a teenager, I barely knew it existed. Everything was BLI, BLI, BLI. But I agree with you. It is so cool that we get to have this bond with our job that maybe other people don't necessarily, because it really helps us to, be more invested, more passionate, and really care about what we're doing.
Absolutely, and it's super important in any industry, but specifically radio, it's super important to be passionate, and if you don't like the type of music that they're playing or you don't kind of like the brand, it's not the same.
Exactly.
So did your love of radio start with a love of music, a love of concerts, or did it start with radio itself? Where did it all begin for you, kind of going all the way back to as far as you can remember?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. And I've got to say, it's a little bit of both radio and music, but I'm gonna give a majority of it to music because for as long as I can remember, I've been just in love with all kinds of music. I remember being 8 years old in my dance class and they'd play, what was hot. And I was like, 8? How is an 8-year-old supposed to know who Fantasia Barrino is? I was just naming off these random people. They're like, how do you know that? And from there, I sort of knew I had a knack for music and I knew a lot about it. It was just one of my strong suits. So that carried me into my love for radio because I was able to identify with these jocks and I would listen to them at night. And, I would call in and I would go by my fake name, Veronica, from... I don't know. I think I said Veronica from Patchogue, actually.
Oh my gosh. No way. That's so funny.
I don't know. But I felt weird having my own name on the radio, so I always went by that. But, my love for music continued, calling into radio stations and things like that. Now, I don't know if I'm getting too ahead of myself here, but the point where I think my passion for pursuing radio started when I was at my school. They had a an interview panel of legends of Long Island radio. That's what it was called. It had a lot of different jocks. There was Wendy Wild from KTU, Steve Harper from KJoy. There was, who else was there? Mark and Cindy from Walk. Just a bunch of radio personalities who were up and talking about the business. And there was something in me at the end that made me want to go up and talk to them. I don't know what it was. it was just a pull. So I was talking to Steve Harper. I'm like, listen, I really, really loved this panel. Thank you for coming in. And he's like, yeah, no problem. Let me know if you'd ever want to come into the studio for like a tour or something. And I was like, yeah, of course. And right then, I feel like my love for radio was sort of like retouched on. And from there, I sort of wanted to know more about it because, like, growing up, yeah, I loved it, but I never knew how any of it worked. So I was able to go on this tour, and that's when I like fell in love. So that day, I asked about an internship, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. So from there, did you intern with them?
I did intern with them for a summer.
Okay.
And then after that, I actually got called on that, not called on, but I was told about an on-air jock position at Party 105. And so my teacher had told me about it, and he's like, you should consider applying. I'll help you make a demo. So I did that at my school.
This is at Suffolk.
Yeah, that was at Suffolk.
Okay.
And the demo, honestly, I don't know how I got hired. Like, I mean, that was, everything was right with the demo, but my voice, the way it was, listening to it now, I had a lot of improvement, like things I had to work on. So it was just wild.
Everyone starts somewhere.
Exactly. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I got it. And, yeah, it led to this insane journey of radio, a very long discovery, and in a way, a fight to really get doing, to get to do what I love to do, because I started out just doing Saturdays. I was literally making $100 a paycheck. It was just rough at first. So, but of course I was new and I understood. So it was just juggling a lot. It was juggling school. It was juggling that. It was juggling another job. So I did that until, I started to reap the benefits of it after about a year or so, where they had me on more and things like that. So, yeah, but I got my start at Connoisseur, and from there it sort of just spiraled very quickly.
Definitely, and that's why I think it's so important for people, if they're interested in a certain industry, to look into internships and just talk to as many people as you can, because you absolutely never know where something is going to lead you. And internships are a way to show that you're actually passionate in something, and people who are working at that company will see your passion, and sometimes they're not paid and sometimes they are, but if you're really doing something you love, it opens so many doors for you.
It's so true. And that's something, that I tell the interns all the time at BLI when they come into the studio. I'm like, ask questions, because that's something that I regret. When I interned, I didn't ask many questions because I didn't know what to ask. But, no one should feel stupid about asking a question that they might think, someone would scoff at or something. I will never scoff at a question. Anything someone wants to learn, you learn, whether it's about programming, whether it's about the business. I'm still asking questions, and I work professionally now. So it's a constant learning experience, but I do think internships are so important to help you learn and build those connections, like you said.
Absolutely, because it also gives you a taste into everything in a company, and you can do so many different things. And there's a lot of things in radio. People just think it's it's just you just sit there and you work the board and you're on air, but I know so much goes on behind the scenes that people are just it's just the jocks, or it's just the program director.
Oh yeah, it's so much more than that.
And everyone works together at our stations, and they just, if it wasn't for everybody doing their own specific little job together, it wouldn't work.
It would not. And yeah, that's something that I got to learn, because as previously mentioned with my old job, I was doing a lot, even when they had me there a lot of the time, because I was doing multiple jobs. And in that way, it was so good because I got to see everything behind it. I was on air, I was receptionist, and I did commercial traffic. So I had my hands full, but I got to see the sales part of it. I got to see the promotions part of it. I got to see the on-air part of it, and to see it all come together. It's such wonderful and delicate ecosystem that, you know, it's worked out to be, but the business in itself is just so, there are a multitude of jobs that you can have that aren't limited to just like selling commercials or being on the radio. There's so much in between.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, and then backtracking just a little bit, who was your biggest inspiration? Did you have like a favorite DJ, a favorite radio show to listen to that you're like, I just want to be like them? Or, I mean, something like that.
Yeah. There were so many. Going really, really early back, if you can remember Steve and Maria in the morning on BLI, super early, like super old morning show. I remember that being one of my first memories, and they had this syndicated program, which was like around the island also, and it was the Carmen call, and it would be like this crank call sort of, like, it's very War of the Roses kind of, like, you know, situation. Yeah. So I remember listening to that, and every single morning getting ready for school, me and my dad would, like, you know, listen to it. So that was one of the first ones. Of course, Dana and Randy were one of my favorites.
They were the icons of BLI.
Getting older, and it's so ironic, but Psych was a huge, like, you know, he was great at what he did. So I definitely looked up to him as well, and I'm sure if he heard this, he'd be like, oh, stop it.
I think we all can admit that we looked up to him at one point, because I mean, we're both pretty new to the company too, so he's been around for a long time. Yeah. We've listened to BLI our entire lives, so obviously we listened to Psych and we're like, yeah, he's great.
Psych at night.
Yeah, Psych at night.
Yeah, so him, and also Astra. I remember when she was Astra after Dark also. So I don't know, if I had to choose some jocks that inspired me a lot, definitely them in the early days. And as, you know, my interest in radio deepened, I definitely acquired new jocks that, you know, I wouldn't have necessarily heard of because they were out of market that I love so much. Like Wendy Wild, once I met her, I started looking at her work. She used to work at BLI actually, and she went to my school, and my teacher would talk about her all the time, so I wanted to see what the hype was. And, you know, just watching her, I got so much of my on-air, you know, influence, my voice, you know, sort of modeled from her. That's what I did a lot when I was developing my on-air. You know, I would go back, listen to a bunch of air checks, and figure out what I liked about it, and then try to mold it to myself. And that's sort of how I found my sound. So a lot of out-of-market DJs as well helped me.
Okay, so you've come such a long way from BLI alone in the past year. We've both been there pretty much at the same time. You've made so much progress from when you got there to where you are now. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about what that process was like, what you went through, like maybe to tell some people who would want to be on air too, what they might have to go through, and the progress of starting at a company and then working your way up, because you are up there. You're doing things.
Thank you very much. It's all because of like hard work, you know. I was at my older job, and I got a text from my friend, Zach Feldman, who worked at Party at the time, and I had voice tracked a show that day. And it's so funny. I still laugh about this because I was in such a rush. I was getting to a family party. I was covering for someone, so I just voice tracked a shift really quickly, and, you know, I left. I did my thing. I went home. So I'm on my way home, and my friend Zach texts me, and he's like, are you on air right now? And I'm like, oh, yeah, why? And he's like, well, Psych heard you, and he really wants to hear a demo from you. And obviously, like I said, Psych's like one of my main influencer DJs, so I was like freaking out a little bit. I'm like, oh my God, he heard me? What are the odds? Like, plus I knew, you know, he was out in West Babylon where, you know, Party doesn't even get in. So it was super random. So of course, you know, I'm freaking out. And the next day I do a demo really quickly. You know, I put together an air check. I do a BLI styled one, and I do my best bits on Party. That was probably the first thing that set me out from the bunch. because they told me that not a lot of people actually send in a BLI style demo, and they found that very impressive. So what I recommend to others, definitely consider listening to that station, even if it's just for an hour. I literally took all the songs from an hour, I monitored it. Like, that's how I made the demo. I listened to it for about an hour, and I listened to the night show, and I wrote down all the songs, all the promos they had running, looked at their website a little bit, and like, had fun with it. Basically created my own show just with an audition, and I sent it out to them along with my best bits. They were impressed, so they wanted to have me into the studio to talk a little bit more, which is where I met Jeremy Rice, and we talked a little bit. And from there, it was pretty much an instant. We were both on the same page. I was a little bit nervous because, going from a full-time job at another radio station to being on air, which is what I really wanted to do. I had a passion in it. It was a tough decision because it was leaving sort of stability for what I really wanted to do and building myself back up. So they knew that. They were on the same page as me, but I still wanted to, grow myself and grow professionally. So I thought it would be a good move. So I ended up coming over in January of 2018. That's so weird. I'm coming up on a year. Yeah.
It flew.
It flew.
You accomplished so much in that year.
I really and it's not just me. They've given me so much opportunity while I've been there. It's absolutely incredible. Every single day I'm stunned by it because, I went from doing overnights in January because, of course, you still have to do overnights because they want to make sure that you're going to sound like how they want to sound on the station. And while you're working on all of that, they're going to put you on some overnights. I probably did overnights for about 3 months or so. So those are brutal. So take a lot of naps is what I would say because, BLI is a station that's run 24/7. Not every station does it, but BLI, cares a lot about their sound. So they want someone in there at all times. So I understood. So eventually I worked my way up to some weekend night shifts, and then they got me into more weeknights filling in, and little by little I managed to score the weeknights, and I was loving it. There was so much potential in the show. I felt like I could do so much. Plus, since I was passionate about all the music, it was just so fun for me. It doesn't even feel like work, you know what I mean?
That's the best kind of job to have.
So from there, I was just working hard until one day they announced that the afternoon show was moving up to the morning show. We were so happy for Psych and MJ. So I got an email that morning, and it was the day after my birthday.
Happy birthday, KIANA.
Happy birthday, me. Do you want to take over the afternoon show? I'm like, yeah. Well, it wasn't takeover. It was, do you want to fill in for the afternoon show?
But that's still crazy amazing.
I know. It's so amazing. I would have never imagined a year ago I would be afternoons on BLI.
And I feel like that's such an important method for people to practice too, is looking back on where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, and it's just realizing how grateful you are for what you have, even if it's not that much, even if it's just a foot in the door, even if it's just doing promo. If you look back on what you did and what you've done in the past year or so, and just, it's so important to be grateful and reflect.
Yeah, and it took a lot of hard work to get there. So what I would recommend people do if they want to move up quickly, because I tell people, who ask me too, because, there are certain things you can do to help yourself move along faster. And it's things like, be prompt, don't complain, don't deny covering shifts. I never say no to covering a shift, no matter what it is. And that's very important because you want to be available for them, to show that you're reliable, because that's something that they look for. So, of course, make some time for yourself, but, you also have to prioritize, what you want. So if you have another job, I worked, multiple jobs for a while, but if the radio station wanted me to come in to do a shift, I tell them, hey, I need to leave a little bit early today so I can do this. So, it all paid off in the long run. It definitely helps you move along quicker. and also try to be there during the day because that's when you establish a lot of your connections.
Absolutely, yeah. So what is one standout experience that you've had while working in radio? Something that you'll never forget the rest of your life, something that was just a wow, amazing moment for you to experience?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had quite a few.
I have, and it's really hard to pick just one.
You can tell as many as you want. I don't put you on the spot.
Yes, but like in a great way. Okay. So one wow moment I've had, I mean, it's sort of a collection of wow moments because every single time I do one of these, it's just the best feeling when someone wins a contest and you hear how happy they are to be seeing their favorite artist. There's absolutely nothing like it, you know, because you get to give somebody that opportunity to go check out their favorite artist. And you know, one of my favorite parts of the job is just interacting with listeners because I like talking to people anyway, and I get paid to do it now, so it's like super cool. Yeah. So, you know, getting to talk to people on the phone, you know, there's always getting recognized for the first time because, you know, when you're a newbie jock, they know the psych and the MJ, but you know, when you start to pick up the phone and people are like, "Oh, hi, KIANA," like, you're like, how do you know my name?
It's like, oh wait, yeah, that's right. I'm on the air.
I say it like 10 times a day, but like when people start picking up on it, it's really cool. And you know, you develop connections with a lot of these people, and so that's a big wow moment. And of course, you know, when I got found by BLI, that was another huge wow moment for me as well.
It's also so cool because we were both listeners too. Yeah. So I'm sure like you coming from being a listener your whole life, and now you're a DJ, you're on air, you're a jock. Yeah. People are looking up to you the same way you're looking up to other people. Exactly. And they're connecting with you the way you would call in and try and win tickets to your favorite artist show. So it's just a full circle moment.
Exactly. Because like I said, I remember, you know, being on the countdown, like, here's number 4, Mike Posner is cooler than me on BLI. And now, like, I get to be on the other side of that. I get younger kids calling in, which I love hearing because then the people who are like, kids don't listen to radio, like, yes, they do.
Oh, yeah. That used to be my favorite thing. I could not be in my car going anywhere. My mom would have a headache. I'd be like, I don't care. We're putting BLI on, and that's it.
Right. And BLI has such a loyal listening behind it. It's such a family thing. It's a Long Island tradition at this point. You know, it's just what people listen to, and it's, you know, the sound of Long Island. And I'm so happy that I get to semi be responsible for that, you know. Absolutely, entertaining people, you know, on their drive home on one of the biggest station really on Long Island, you know, and ratings, like, they do amazing, and it's just so cool to carry on the tradition. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, obviously after the popularity of streaming took off, radio took a little bit of a hit and is continuing to take a little bit of a hit from it. Right. How do you see, like, do you have any ideas on where you think that the industry is going to go in the next few years? And how do you see yourself playing into that role? Do you think that radio will be super impacted, or we're kind of just going to teeter the line like we have been?
Right. And that's a good question that I think it's really important to acknowledge, because if we want radio to keep on thriving, then we're going to have to adapt to the times. Now, the way I see radio heading, I think that they're going to start finding a lot of online influencers, sort of like how Sirius has Jenna Marbles on Hits 1, I believe, you know, like YouTubers like that, you know, bring in podcasters, popular podcasters to be doing shows and stuff like that. We're going to have to integrate between online and terrestrial radio, which might be a little bit tough, but the one good thing about radio is it's free. It's always available. Plus, in times like, you know, weather emergencies, local emergencies, there's always going to be radio to tell you what's going on. So in those ways, it is always available and local, which, you know, you can't get from a Pandora or a Spotify. So it's very important for us to remain local, but integrating with, you know, modern technology or, you know, social media, if you will, because it is, you know, a dominating force here. I think it's better to sort of co-integrate them and, have them work together, because if people are still interested in podcasts, they're still interested in radio. I also think it's important that, we start to bring radio into a newer time, which a lot of stations are adapting to, catering to older people as well. But, it's important to keep the youth interested. That way they carry it on as they get older also.
Because the youth are the ones who are streaming, they're using other services. But that's funny because one of the questions I was asked when I was interviewing for the internship at the station was, why listen to the radio when you can just stream everything? And the answer I gave was that you're not going to get the locality of it. You're not going to be able to connect with your community and know what's going on in your community through, like you said, Pandora, through Spotify, through Apple Music. So that's actually the answer I gave when I was interviewed.
Because it's one of the most important things about radio. It's local, and there's that human connection as well. You can call your favorite jocks, like, you can't really do that with Spotify or Pandora. You're just sort of, in the black hole listening to what they pick out for you based on algorithms and stuff. Whereas, radio, it's research based off of very, very localized studies and things like that. Plus, you can, call in, ask to hear something.
There's a person behind it. It's not just, the robotic, like, oh, it's going to give you what you want, but this is going to give you can discover so many new artists. I mean, you can on streaming too, but on the radio, you're listening to a mix of different things. So you're always going to be throwing new things, whether you like it or not. It might be outside your comfort zone. So that's always a good way too.
Yeah, it's a great way to discover new music and all that also.
And radio is... You can always turn your car radio on, and it'll always be there for you. If I have a very old car, so I have to have the thing that plugs into the cigarette lighter, and then it connects to my phone that connects to the headphone jack. It's a whole big process. So if I forget that, I can't listen to my phone. So I always have the radio. If my phone's dead, I'll just turn it on, and the radio is always there for you. So it's really never going to go away. It's like you said, it's about integrating the new with our format of radio that we know now.
Exactly. And once we, pinpoint that, I think we'll be good. Like, radio will live to see many, 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 many years. So.
Which is actually funny that you mentioned the influencers and the podcasters too, because one of my favorite YouTubers actually has her own podcast now. And they just bridge the gap. So not only does she create YouTube content, but she's also doing podcasting, which I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then eventually if they're doing podcasting, they could go into hosting their own shows too.
Right. And that's a lot of things that radio hosts are jumping on as well, especially in CMG. I see a lot of our jocks nationwide starting these podcasts and branching out that way too. And that helps to bring in new listeners from out of market. Although, of course, at the end of the day, whatever market you should be focusing should be in the number one priority. It's also really cool to, bring in listeners from, other markets who may not have heard of you because of your podcast.
And we also have our apps. So someone in any other country can listen to BLI, to BAB. So, it really, there's no limit. So as we're going more into the digital age, we still have ways for people to listen and to connect. Because, even if you're not in our community, you can still be in our community.
Right.
And, for BLI Summer Jam, I knew people who came from California and Florida just to see our show.
And that's another good point to bring up about, pro radio. You're not going to be able to, win all of these exclusive experiences on streaming sites like you can radio, because artists have a lot of loyalty to radio. And so, their labels are often giving us concert tickets, often giving us meet and greets and all this stuff. So that is really helpful and something that, you can't just get online. You can't get it for free. So that's another thing that keep people coming back, because of the contest part of it. But you're so right about, BLI Summer Jam. These people are coming from all over because, our social media, people might see it on their Twitter and they're like, oh my gosh, that's an awesome lineup. I need to go. And it's just bringing people in from everywhere.
Yeah. And it really it unites people. Mm-hmm. And that's something that really Spotify, Apple Music's not going to do it. Spotify has these Spotify fan first sessions where if you're the number one, that artist is your number one in Spotify, and if you listen or stream them enough, you can get tickets to their show or to an exclusive event. But radio stations are constantly, every day, there's contests going on. They care about giving you concert tickets and meet and greets and opportunities. And there's always, no matter who you are, how old you are, where you are on the island, you can always look and you can win. So it's something that streaming and online things are not going to offer for you.
It's so true. I agree 100%.
For those people who don't know what it's like to work at a radio station, don't know the daily life of something, can you walk us through your daily, from when you pull up to the station to when you leave? What does the daily life look like?
People might think, I don't know what people would think about it. It's something, I guess I used to wonder about it. I used to think you just pull up to the station, pull the microphone down, and talk. But it is so much more than that. In a way, it's almost similar to an office job because, we literally work in an office. It's just, it has a studio too. It has multiple production studios, which is really the only difference. So, basically, I pull up around 20 minutes before a show, usually, sometimes more. I usually do most of my prep at home. So if you're not doing your prep at home, probably come in an hour, but I do a lot of it at home.
So let me just interject here. Most people don't even know that prep goes into shows. They just think you pull up, you know exactly what to say, and you just go. And however long the show is, there is so much that goes into things. I'm not on air, I don't do board op, but I've seen you guys work so hard and so many hours on so many different preps for things you didn't even think you'd have to prep for. A regular person who has no idea wouldn't even think. There's a lot of work that goes into it.
A show without prep is not a good show. You just have to pull up, I've done it before and it's just bad because, you're constantly searching for, something to talk about before you go and do your break. And it's just so stressful. So, it's so much better to just prepare your show. It doesn't roll off the tongue, something that I don't think, any, people probably wouldn't know unless they were in the career is that how much of DJing is an art form in a way because you have to there's a lot of work involved in it, but you have to make it sound as if it were effortless.
And that's something we talk about actually in this class, is that it takes so many years and so much skill and talent to craft your own persona, your voice, your personality. Not everybody can do this. Sure, you can pull down a mic and talk into it, but is it going to sound good? Are you going to be fit for radio? No, it's not something for everybody. So
it takes a lot of hard work and researching your demographic as well. So, we have a social media quota at BLI. So it's, one Instagram post every hour, one Facebook post every other hour, and then one tweet every half hour. So it doesn't really sound like a lot until you have to do it.
While you're working the board, while you're on air, while you're managing everything else that's going on.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes because, we've got to check off our commercial logs, making sure everything's running as according to schedule. Me in the afternoons, I'm downloading traffic if it's not there for me in the library already. I've got to do meter readings. There's a lot to do behind the scenes. People are like, why aren't you answering your phone? And it's because I don't have the time to do it during an air shift. I don't get around to replying to things until about 2 hours into my show because those first 2 hours are so crucial to the rest of your show. So sometimes interns will want to stay and hang out. I'm this is great, but maybe could you come back in an hour or two? Of course I like them hanging out and everything, but if they have questions and stuff, it's I can answer them. Just give me an hour or two because getting your show off the ground is the most crucial part. You want, because the way your show starts is, sort of reflective on how the rest of your show is going to be. Other people might not think that, people say, because it's true, you're basically getting a new audience every 15 or 20 minutes or so. So, it's nice that, the people who just heard your bad break probably aren't going to be around for your next break. So it's a fresh start in a way, which really helps me out when I was starting because, it can get discouraging sometimes. But, it's so important to show prep and do your thing. So, I walk in, I write out my weather. Weather is very important. So that's like really the first thing that I'm talking about. So then after that, I wish I brought my notebook with me. I could show you.
Oh, is that your planner that you created?
There's the planner that I created, which is so helpful to help me keep track of events and stuff. And then there is also, my show book. So that's sort of, one side is weather, one side is socials, and it just helps me keep my brain together, because when I first started doing it, I'm like, wait, did I post about this already? I don't even remember. So it was just so much easier to have a book to keep me on track. So it's researching, a lot of gossip sites, and, I get a lot of those email lists that, someone might see and be like, why would I want to, who uses email lists? But it's so useful to help me prep for my show, because it's a lot of stuff that no one really hasn't heard of yet. So it's like curating the best content that you can find and putting it out there, which is especially important during, the prime time hours, because, that's obviously when most people are listening, and it only takes 1 second to flip the station.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it behind the scenes.
Not a lot of people realize that it's not just, all right, I'm going to pull this microphone up and I'm going to talk for 3 hours, 4 hours. That's not what it is. I'm not going to press a button and it's going to play. That's not...
Yep, that was one of my very first rude awakenings as an intern, seeing how much actually went into it.
Okay, so elaborating on some advice that you gave earlier, what do you think is the best advice you can give to someone who's looking to get into radio but doesn't know where to start, maybe doesn't have the connections, doesn't have any of the skills, doesn't know any of the board, nothing like that? They just, fresh, clean start, they want to get into radio, they don't know where to turn.
It's going to sound super out there, but you'd be surprised, people email for station tours, and a lot of the time people don't mind at all, and a jock will give you a station tour. It's so common, and I think people are afraid to ask because they don't know anyone who ever has. But if you want to establish a connection, just ask hey, so I'm really into radio, I would love to see what the BLI studio looks like, what you do. Most of the time people won't really mind. They'll totally open the doors and, show you everything, let you shadow and stuff like that. But aside from that, the most important things probably for someone to remember when getting into this industry, it's not easy. Be ready for a lot of nights work, holiday work when you're first starting out, and, just be there for the team and help people out any way you can. Also, your other coworkers who are still learning along with you, try to help them out as well. That's very important, because you guys are a team. For the station to sound coherent, you're going to want everyone to sound good. So if someone has a question, try to answer it. Be punctual, and don't get too in your head about things, emotionally. That's a big part of, any aspect, radio, TV, film. It's actually very it's a pretty stressful job. We're in a very short, how do I describe this? We're just in a very fast-paced environment all the time. So, it takes a week to plan something, and then we're turning it over, and we've got to deliver. I have 5 minutes to think of what I'm going to say next. It's a lot of, you've got to be on point with everything. So, time management has to be good. That's something that I've had to work on myself. So, make sure that time management's there. Don't get too in your head about it. At the end of the day, it's business. And as long as you remember those things, at the end of the day, say, this was really fun. Let's do it again sometime. That's what my professor always told me to say. And, just be as convenient as possible. People like someone who's going to be convenient and work for them. If you remember those things, you should fly by in radio and do great things.
Absolutely. I think that's all that stuff is so important. And it's just so important not to worry about things ahead of time. I think just take it as it comes and just do the best you can in general, and then you should be fine. You've worked so hard to get to where you are. People who are icons in the industry have worked so hard, so many years, have done so many dirty jobs or yes, just say yes, yes, yes all the time. Like you have to do not the fun work to get to where you really want to be.
It's true.
And it's not just the glamorous, like, oh, I'm gonna go to radio school for 2 years or 3 months and then I'll just be like this famous DJ.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. It's a lot of grunt work. But once you get it down, like, you know, people will trust you more and you'll be able to truly start doing what you've like always dreamed of doing.
So if you could sum up your job in a few sentences, maybe why you love it, things that are the most beneficial about it, your favorites about it, what would you say?
So I love my job because it is local, it is live, it is local, and I get to connect with listeners over music, which to me cannot be described in any other way but absolute bliss. When I'm working, you know, it's like therapy for me. You know, I'll have a bad day, but, you know, I can go into the studio and it will, you know, it's almost like, you know, your troubles fade away, which sounds so cheesy, but, you know, you're distracting your mind with something you love doing, you know, music especially, you know, I've had a passion for music ever since I was a baby practically. So it's so cool for me. But, you know, there's also those labors of love as well. The things that maybe, yeah, you don't want to do, but you kind of have to do anyway. So it's not all fun and games all the time, but I am very lucky to have an occupation where it can be based around one of my main passions, which is music, which is interacting with listeners all around Long Island. And the more I work in radio, the more in love with Long Island I fall, which sounds so cheesy. But there is so much going on in our communities, which we might not see now because, you know, everything's so globalized with social media. But, you know, when you look at everything going on in your community, it's actually really cool. So I've been much more involved in the community. It's such a great job to have. A lot of work to get there, but it is so worth it at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was amazing. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Oh, thank you.
It was amazing talking to you.
This was an amazing podcast.
Oh, why, thank you. All right, you just watched or heard another episode of Podcat. That was KIANA on air, and you can hear her on air on WBLI when?
As of right now, afternoons 3 to 8, Monday through Thursday, 3 to 7, Monday through Friday. And we'll see what happens very soon, hopefully. We find out if this is permanent or not.
We will keep you updated on the next episode of Podcat. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Bye.